Oh, good job, Terry.
Yeah, if the mouse only worked the same way my eyes do,
Oh,
we need to get into that century where I just look at something and it changes.
yeah.
All right, so today we're gonna go over the December 2024 revisions to the things that are the most important, the forms that we use the most often right now. There were a lot of changes, 60-some changes total. Some of them were ands and buts and therefores and a couple of sentences here and there. But we're going to hit on some of the top forms that we deal with on a regular basis. And then we'll get on some of the supplemental forms a little bit later, not a little bit later today, but within the next week or two. So the forms that we use the most, or that we hope we use the most, residential listing forms. That's our favorite thing to do, is take listings right now. And I have, let's see, Carolyn is uploading these things, and I tried to emphasize a couple of things to make sure that you don't fill it out exactly this way and you're not being taught that this is the only way to do it, because I don't want to end up in real estate prison. But
Yeah, Mama.
here is a residential listing agreement. And as you can see by looking at the top of it, most of it is the same. Here's the seller, here's us, here's the address, those are all the same. Here's an APN. Here's the listing period. Note on here that it says not to exceed 24 months if it's a 1 to 4 unit and not owned by an entity. So I hope you wouldn't have to take a listing for 24 months anyway, but you never know. We do have a lot of commercial properties that go that far. But price that I put on here, just so that we could actually fill one out where we couldn't on the draft, is just $650,000, which I know that that's probably kind of right in the middle of our ballpark and things. We go all the way from a couple of $100,000 to a couple of million. So I just threw that here in the middle. If it's a manufactured home, here's an opportunity for you to check, and that will attach an addendum automatically. If it's a probate or a conservatorship, then the probate listing addendum will be attached. So checking either of those will accomplish the residential listing agreement, which is exactly what it says. It's a residential listing agreement. All right, so can you live in a manufactured home? Yes. Can you live in a condo? Yes. Can you live in different? Yes, you can. So if you can live in it, then it's going to be covered by one of those addendums. All right, notice here, and this didn't change, but I'm just going to tell you about it anyway, that the amount of real estate commission is not fixed by law. So here, where we were talking about commissions, this is only seller's side of the transaction. And I put 3% in here. That is negotiable because it just said so up here. That is something that you can discuss with your seller. It's totally negotiable. However, make sure that you have your value in there somehow. You guys do a lot of work. I don't know if you know that, but you do a lot of work. You put a lot of time and effort into these listings all the way from the time they're before you even list it, when you're doing the market analysis, when you're doing all of the initial paperwork and things, and then all the way through the listing itself. It's a whole lot more than sticking a sign up. You know that. Don't devalue yourself. Don't give yourself away. But 3% is only the negotiating part that I threw in there. Notice that I put sample only. And then here I've had several questions recently about the broker created compensation schedule. All right, we as a brokerage do not have a created compensation schedule. And what that actually is that if you had a compensation schedule that was based on the purchase price of the property, and I don't mean a percentage, I mean that maybe if it's a $2 million property or more, then maybe in your mind, you've created something that says that you would charge 2.5 or whatever it happens to be. Those are all negotiable all the way down. And lastly, if broker represents both buyer and seller, buyer side compensation shall be specified in a separate written agreement between broker and buyer. Now, those top two things in this residential listing agreement are great opportunities for you to discuss with your seller what they actually mean. And so take the time to explain how compensation works now. Provide them with the BCA if you want to, the broker compensation addendum. And go through how this is going to happen so that nothing's a surprise to them on the other end. Continuation and right of compensation. So this one is something that
Terry,
it's
can I comment
please.
back up here when you're talking about this 1%? A lot of agents are confusing that with that's the compensation that's going to go to the buyer broker versus that is a compensation you get if you if you get a buyer who's not unrepresented. So that seems to be some kind of confusion there. It's not a buyer broker compensation.
True. That, yeah, and it specifies it underneath. Notice that it says here,
Yeah.
additional, and Jackie's exactly right. It's additional compensation to seller's broker if buyer is unrepresented. Just like this is compensation to seller's broker. And I'm not going to go back to how we used to do it, but there was always agents that would put down, even when we were dealing with 5, 6, 7%, they would write down that they would have a 6% commission, for instance. However, if they sold it themselves and were on both sides, they would do it for a lesser amount because they would have more control over it. So this is kind of like a reversal from where we were before, but it still works. And we don't want sellers' obligations to pay previous brokers. I wouldn't think you would want that. I put none in there, but if somebody is already tied into a previous broker through a buyer representation agreement or something else, then do I really want to be spending any time with them? And are they in a position where they can pay out, or me and them and everybody else included? So I would highly recommend that if you get to that point and they have obligations to previous brokers, that's not something that you move in the direction of.
Terry, also can
Go
we
ahead, Jackie.
to C3 where it says continuation period? Remember, that's a safety clause. So if you've shown a client a property, so I would put a longer period of time in there. If they're just waiting 30 days, I think I would put like 180 days. It's just your safety clause, so they don't go around you and buy directly to the seller or use another agent. That's
Okay.
my-
Yeah. Those numbers are whatever you feel like, obviously, and 180, there's nothing wrong with that. Don't spread it out for the rest of their lives or anything like
Oh,
that.
I think we should
because
go 2 years.
3 years, okay.
No,
3
just long
years.
enough to where they're
How
not.
many calendar days is that?
No.
No, I get it.
I'm,
Yeah,
I'm so sorry, Terry and Jackie. Can you, I was interrupted. Can you, and I didn't quite catch that, what is the maximum length time for the listing? Is that what we were discussing?
No, we were discussing C3, where it talks about the continuation period shall be in their example was 30 days after the listing period. So if you're working with a buyer, or you have another buyer coming in from another agent, I like to put a little bit longer period of time in there. It's a safety clause for you, protection, that if you put 120, 180 days, they're going to think twice about waiting out the period to be able to go around you or use another agent.
Got
Do you
it.
have to list the clients like in the past, Jackie?
Yes, you always have to give that seller a list of the buyers that clause is protecting. Yes, good point. Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
You don't have to apologize for asking a question.
No, please ask questions.
you're
That's
good.
That's why
And-
we're doing this.
And if
Just-
I could just add on the cancellation of contract, it also asks you there, it has a spot there for you to list. If you've shown the home and it's your listing, it gives you a spot there to put in before the seller signs the cancellation.
Okay,
Who you've shown the home to as well.
Correct.
okay, good.
Thank you, Jaime.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on quickly here. We got items included. I just threw in refrigerator. Obviously, that's all negotiable. Excluded is all negotiable. those are all things, smart features include installed video equipment. Are you going to include them? Are you going to exclude them? Pay attention to those kind of things. And I don't mean to go through these too fast, but I want to hit on the highlights of the things that changed in the last 2 weeks. So publication of willingness to consider concessions. Okay, so just think back to a couple of weeks ago and a couple of months ago when we started teaching about the MLSA. All right, the MLSA, Multiple Listing Service Addendum, was and still is a secondary form, but in that form, there was a checkbox, couple of checkboxes on page 2, paragraph 5, that asked these same questions. But now they have moved that from the MLSA. So although the MLSA is still an important form and used for other items, this is brought to the listing agreement itself. If checked below, seller authorizes broker to market that seller is willing to consider offers asking for concessions. Okay, remember that statement because that's a good one to use when you're putting it in the private remarks of the MLS or if you're putting in some other type of marketing. It's an important statement. Seller is willing to consider offers asking for concessions. All right, so no amount of possible concession will be stated in such marketing unless seller notifies broker in writing of an amount. So no amount. You can still use this top sentence that says seller is willing to consider offers asking for concessions, but no amount can be written anywhere in any of your marketing unless the seller notifies broker in writing of the amount. Now we put together a secondary addendum that's just out of the addendum itself. There was a statement involved there, and I think we get to it a little bit later. If not, we can forward it. But basically, if your seller notifies you in writing of an exact amount, we're willing to pay up to such and such, then you could use that somewhere other than the MLS for marketing. Now, I don't know why you'd want to use that number, but this is what it tells you. But I don't know why you'd want to use the number, for instance, because if I was representing a seller and they said, oh, well, we'd pay up to $20,000 for all of that stuff, then as a buyer's agent, what would I ask for? I would ask for $20,000 because that's what they were offering. So it takes it out of the negotiating process. And I want to be able to negotiate everything if we have to negotiate. But this gives us the right, if it's permitted by the MLS, to say this up here: seller is willing to consider offers asking for concession. And in any other marketing outside the MLS, it gives us the authority and the right and the privilege of advertising that the seller is willing to consider concessions. And in my opinion, I would leave it at that. Jackie, I don't know if you think of anything different, but I would leave it at that rather than to try to negotiate amounts and things on the front end.
Yeah, I agree, because if they bring an offer, have them bring their commission at the same time. It's,
Yeah.
But like you said, if you offer a percentage and the buyer comes in with a lesser amount, why advertise it if you're representing your seller?
Jerry, there's an agent that's trying to sign in, but it says it's at capacity. Does that make sense? The Zoom's at capacity?
It means they didn't pay for the additional, so
Yeah.
they got the free version, which is only 100.
What?
Nice.
Jackie,
Lesson learned.
is it possible to get a copy for this one as a?
Yes, it's in the chat.
Yeah, everything
Oh, perfect.
you'll be able to get all of this information via
No, I
chat.
mean copy for this model. This one. Can I have it?
Look in the chat, please.
I will.
So
All right.
what do I tell this agent, Terry?
We'll have this class again on the
Be
6th.
early next time. It's actually, we knew we would have some limitations. We didn't know that 100 of you would be working after the holidays.
Surprise. We're
Yeah.
proud of you.
Oh,
Good
okay, I
job,
see.
Great job. We're gonna do this again, I think, on the 6th.
Okay,
It's
it.
because it's Terry and Jackie. Good morning.
Wow. Thank you, Emma.
Thanks.
So if it was just one or the other, there wouldn't be as many here. All right, so let's move on. This is something that they threw in there kind of, which is a good thing. Seller's interference with listing. All right, so everything we do on that right of compensation that Jackie was just referring to on the 180 days and all that, the days that we were trying to figure out there. If without broker's prior written consent, the property is withdrawn from sale, conveyed, leased, rented, otherwise transferred, or made it unmarketable by a voluntary act of the seller during the listing period or any extension. So that's one of the things that on that continuation, I know we try to use it as a protection, and if somebody sells it to somebody else and things like that. But notice that there's several things in there that it says that, you know, if a seller goes out front, he's tired of you and he doesn't like anymore, or whatever the case is, and he goes out and takes your sign down and he won't let anybody see the property and things, then there's an issue there. That's an interference with the listing, is it not? If I have a 120-day listing and after day 67, they're frustrated, and so they take the sign down, they change their mind, and they put a sign out there that says to rent. And if they've done that without a cancellation, then that also is part of that continuation. So I just wanted to emphasize that for a second. So down here, unrepresented buyers. This is a further definition of unrepresented buyers. It says if a buyer is interested in viewing seller's property, is not already represented by a real estate broker, and such buyer refuses to be represented by a broker, seller authorizes broker to obtain a signed document from such buyer, refusing representation by a broker. Broker shall provide such buyers at the earliest practicable time a disclosure of non-representation. Okay, that's a form in there, BNA, buyer broker non-representation agreement, and or non-agency agreement. Open house, it also says in there, that's part of where it explains that you can see the house unrepresented, just sign here. You don't have to be represented, just sign here. And so those, and the new thing on the OHNA, and it's in here someplace, that it says right at the top that it's for purposes of an open house and for a single party showing of the property to an unrepresented potential buyer. Seller concessions. Okay, this whole little section was added in here to make sure people understood what seller concessions are. Now, by people, what do I mean? I mean by the agents who are going out to do it, and also by the sellers who are trying to figure out what concessions mean. Well, they're asking for all this money and for everything. They want me to pay all of their title fees. They want me to pay their closing costs. They want me to pay. Okay, so this is an explanation. Concessions are monetary payments that a seller agrees to contribute toward a buyer's expenses and other costs a buyer is responsible for. A buyer is responsible for, right? So the seller agrees to contribute towards things a buyer is responsible for in this transaction. They may include, but are not limited to, cost of escrow or title, lender fees, repairs, inspections. And I highlighted this little one here because everybody wants to know buyer broker compensation. So yes, it's identified in here that there may be buyer broker compensation. Gives us another opportunity to discuss with the seller about how commissions and compensations and things work nowadays. All right.
So, Terry, quick question. Would
Yes,
that be
Jaime.
would that be a line that we would be able to put in the private remarks in the MLS? Copy and paste that in there if the seller is open?
Yes, as long as you don't use an amount. Yes, Jaime. All right. So concessions
Not the
specified in the
compensate, not where it says compensation. They can put the concessions only, not compensation. The word,
in the private remarks.
correct. They cannot put buyer broker compensation. Remember, there's no reference to us getting compensated by through the MLS. Even though we know that concessions are, yes, we can use them as part of the compensation. Does that make sense? Okay, go ahead.
And I wanted to emphasize this last one for just a second, and that is concessions identified in an MLS listing are not promises to pay, but indicate to a buyer that the seller will consider offers asking for concessions. And these are the concessions they could be asking for. So they're not promises to pay. There's no guarantee out of that. Somebody says they'll pay concessions and then they change their mind when the offer comes in. That's okay. That's still the way it goes. There's still negotiating room there. All right, the last thing that I want to cover on the listing agreement itself, and then we'll hit a couple of other forms. Entity sellers. Okay, so this has been revised. And every contract throughout every contractual agreement that we have, whether it's an RPA or whether it's the BRBC or anything else, this is changed on it. So you will notice those changes. But basically, entity seller, if this paragraph is completed, you do not need a representative capacity signature disclosure form. That started just a little bit ago. However, verbiage has been changed a little because for some reason we can't get it through our minds what an entity seller or entity buyer is. So this just helps a little. Non-individual entities, one or more sellers is a trust, a corporation, an LLC, a probate, a state, partnership, holding a power of attorney or other entity. I think they've covered most of them there other than, well, I think they covered all the ones that we deal with on a regular basis. You put in the full name of the entity. All right, this is I'm a Learning Family Trust, date 7/5/20. Contractual identity of seller. For purposes of this agreement, when the name described below is used, okay, what's the name described below? Right here. It shall be deemed to be the full entity name. So you don't have to put this on all of the paperwork. You only have to have it on this part of the paperwork. That makes this person, in this case, since it's a listing, that makes this person the seller. All right, it may be the trust that they're representing, but this person has the authority to act in behalf of the trust. If the property is sold under the jurisdiction of a probate court, the name of the executor or minister or simplified probate name or John Doe can be used if you have anything going on up here. If legally authorized signer is I'm a Learning in this case, right? So they can sign everything. I'm a Learning comes out on here. You don't have any issues with where put initials are put or anything else. It will only recognize this. So this has to be put in there in order for that to happen on every contract. Okay, we talked about the MLS service addendum. Just a couple of things that in here that didn't change. I told you that they pulled the part that says that you can market it in the MLS if you have those two check boxes signed. Right, we talked about that in the listing itself, but it says here, here's the impact of marketing out of the MLS. And it says seller is marketing the property and the scope of marketing will consist only of direct one-on-one promotion between brokers and licensees affiliated with the listing brokerage and their respective clients. So that's just letting people know that if we opt out of the MLS, then my options are limited. Hopefully they would know that anyway. Help them read that. If they go, well, I don't know about the MLS, just make it seem part of the norm. Doesn't have to be, it can be negotiated out, but it emphasizes it here. And it also emphasizes here that we used to have a form that as of a couple of weeks ago no longer exists. It was called the SELM, seller exempt from listing material. Anyways, it's gone. So when you tried to put something up that says seller wants to exclude this listing from the MLS, then this is where we take care of that now. So on the MLSA, seller instructs broker to exclude the property from dissemination by the MLS. The MLS may require its own form. And at this case, we don't have an own form. We just, when we enter the MLS, there's a little place to register it, which we'll have to cover at a different time. But that tells them to exclude the property. This one tells us when to begin marketing the property. You know that the rule is that it goes into the MLS on how many days afterwards, Jackie? 1.
24 hours.
That would be
Yeah.
one business
Okay.
day, correct?
Yes. But what's the one business day for an MLS? They're kind of open all, I mean, they may not be there to answer questions for us, but we can put things in all the time pretty much. So basically 1 day, 24 hours. So it needs to go in there within that much time. But we don't have to begin marketing it until such and such. So if that date is put in there, then, or this one is not to market the property at all during the listing period, we have those options. So I don't want it listed. I don't want it put on the market. I don't want to do all these things. This one tells us that we can totally exclude it from the MLS. Or we have different instructions. Otherwise, seller understands and agrees that property list will be submitted to the MLS within 1 business day. All right.
Terry, just one question.
Please.
Is it based on the date that the listing was, that the paperwork was prepared, or the date of signature of the sellers?
Date of the signature of the sellers. That's when it
Okay.
becomes contractual.
Thank
Good
you.
question. Yeah.
Mhm.
Because there's a lot of times that's why before, a couple of revisions ago, they changed that little date prepared up in the left-hand corner of all of the agreements that says, because I could prepare something today for a listing that I didn't have until 2 days after New Year's or something. So good question. All right. So this form is still an important form. Don't forget this. It automatically downloads when you do your RLA on zip forms. And so don't just think that it doesn't mean anything, because it gives us a lot of opportunities to discuss things. You know, a lot of times we talk with our clients, but we kind of leave them short of actual information. We get the grid filled out, so to speak. And notice we didn't go through the grid a whole lot today because we've gone through those in the past, but we go through the grid a whole lot, but we don't always discuss things very much. The other thing is that all of these paragraphs and things that are here on the 3rd, 4th, 5th pages of this agreement explain to you what those things mean. And we sometimes don't know the answers to those ourselves. I know that everybody that's on here today has thoroughly read the listing agreement top to bottom. I have that much confidence in you guys, but I can tell you that sometimes as you go through these paragraphs, if you take time to actually discuss them with your people, you will get different answers. All right. So,
Terry,
Terry,
when
yes, Lori, go ahead.
when it asks about the starting date for marketing, what is that like, work with a delayed listing, or you're not sure because they signed, but the market's getting ready or cleaned up? Is that important of a date on that?
You know, the importance of the date, I think there on the listing agreement itself, and maybe I should have spent more time on it, but I didn't because it wasn't new. But there's a coming soon status that you all know about. And the coming soon status is something that covers, we're going to paint, we're going to put in carpet, we're having some work done to whatever. And we don't want to list it until the 15th of January. And our discussion at that point is that, or at least could be, that we can go ahead and list it so that other brokers know about it, but it's not going to be marketed to the public through the MLS, which means that it's not going to be marketed to the public through Zillow and Trulia and some of those until a date that it goes active. And so when we're going to begin that is this date. So we're coming soon, which gives us a maximum of 21 days. But we could go active on the MLS somewhere before that 21 days if they finish the work earlier. Does that kind of make sense? It's like coming soon would put you in a 21-day position at the maximum. But we think it'll only take us 7 or 10 days or something, so you could still get it listed. You could still make it active you could still make it or put it on the MLS in a coming soon status within that 24-hour period. And know that this date is going to be shy of that 21. It's only going to take us 10 days to get that taken care of.
What happens if the 21 days is up and coming and it's not ready? For example, probate.
Well, if it's a probate,
Or any other reason where they're not done with the work, that property is not ready, the executor, administrator, or owner, or whoever needs more time.
well, you don't have the option to extend a coming soon. You can't extend that for other times. What we've been told by the MLS is that you can change it to hold do not show. However, days on market starts at that point in time. Days on markets are not accumulating while it's in coming soon status.
So Terry,
So
one of those,
Terry,
Oh, wait a
question,
minute.
is
We
there,
got-
is there a form that we can extend or cancel the contract and reissue a new contract or something like, because I've seen that happen.
No, you cannot cancel it because it doesn't stop accumulating time.
Can you put it on hold?
You can put it
Yeah,
on
but that
hold.
accumulates time.
Hold, do not show. I just read this recently where
Yeah.
they.
Hold do not show. That's what I said to start out
Yeah,
with. That's
exactly. And that's your really only resource.
Well,
It's and yes, it is gonna accumulate days, but that you can't extend the coming soon and you cannot cancel and because they show that as,
What if you get an offer on day 10 when you're in that 21-day status? You can still sell it, right? You just have to make it
you
active.
gotta put it active real quick. Yeah, because you're not supposed to be showing the property during the time that it's in a coming
Say
soon.
someone makes a blind offer or something like that.
Oh, and it's, yeah.
you can accept offers during a coming soon, but Jackie's right. You're not supposed to be showing the property.
So,
Right.
it
so
would be
Terry,
like-
under D, one of those 3 boxes is gonna have to be marked, right? Number 2, A or B. Right there, yeah. One of those 3 boxes has to be marked, right?
No. These are separate instructions. If you just did a regular listing agreement, you go out today, you take a listing agreement, you get all of the signatures, everybody's happy. You have 24 hours to put that on the market automatically.
Hmm.
And so E takes care of that. Seller understands and agrees that should any public marketing occur, property listed will be submitted to the MLS within 1 business day. So if none of these are checked, this is going to take the place of that.
Okay,
Got it.
but then Terry, so if it is probate and you want the listing, you can easily check that box where you do not have to market the property in the MLS. And then when it's ready, then you list it in the MLS.
That is true. If your listing goes on long enough to cover that, but yes,
Okay, so that's what we do. Okay,
exclude the property from dissemination in the MLS.
there we go.
That's
And
what it does. Okay. So you all know how to list every property available. Jackie, are you ready to talk for a while?
Oh, you're doing such a great job. I like talking over you.
You like,
Are we
oh,
gonna?
you're just like my wife. That's-
Exactly. So are we gonna go to the residential or we're gonna buy a broker? We're gonna run out of time here pretty soon.
Yeah, we are. But
So
I think we don't have to cover this a lot. I actually just threw this in there when I was
I
putting
think
together.
we could go, actually, the biggest issue on our resident or the purchase contract is certainly gonna be G1 or G section, seller payment to cover buyers expenses and costs. That's probably your biggest one.
Okay, you want to go to that?
Yeah, why don't we go to that so we don't run out of time?
Okay,
so-
as long as you're talking, why don't you keep talking?
Okay, all right, just so everyone knows, there is no longer an SPBB. Thank goodness, one less form that we have to put with our contracts. So
There's
that-
two. We don't have an SELM either, so see, there
Yeah,
you
so
go.
there's two. We've
Wiping them out.
deleted two, which I think is great. So for example, and it's gonna, or down here, G2, where it says buyer does not have sufficient funds to pay. So before it didn't have that option. You just put in there that seller was required to, as they were asking for it because they didn't. But I'll be honest with you, buyer not having sufficient funds, I really think we need to take that back to forms because a lot of times buyers do have sufficient funds. They choose not to use those sufficient funds. Wouldn't you agree on that, Terry?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I think so. We can't had one come to the table without going through a lot of detail. We had one that had a contingency on a property and they were going to have a net proceeds of about $400,000.
Right.
And the obligation to pay then is moved. But I think the important thing on here also, and Jackie's exactly right, sometimes they do, but here it says buyer broker's obligation to represent buyer in the transaction is contingent upon a seller's agreement to pay the amount of compensation.
Right.
So-
And
so
Miguel
just-
has his hand up. So let's see what, Miguel, did you have a question about something we've already
Oh,
done?
Miguel, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing that part of things.
Miguel?
Too late, he got mad and left. I don't
He's
know.
got his hand up. Do you
Oh.
need to have your hand up? We can't hear you. And it doesn't look like you're muted. Okay, go ahead, Terry. You were talking about the buyer's obligation to represent buyer in a transaction is contingent upon seller's agreement to pay the amount of compensation in paragraph 2E.
Yeah, so that breaks it back up to here, back up in the
Up
RPA.
Right,
that's-
okay, so the amount of compensation, that's what you're asking for, yes. So if the seller says, no, I'm not gonna pay that amount, obviously, you can still modify your buyer broker agreement and make arrangements that way.
Okay, what else do you want to talk about? Here's that entity thing that I told you would appear on
That's
all
on-
of your
Right,
agreements.
that's on that, yeah, we've gone over that, so I don't think that's something that's real necessary. I think probably what we need to talk about real quick would probably be the buyer broker representation. Do we have that document there?
Probably. Not in exactly the order that we're going, but I'm sure it's here someplace.
It's there somewhere. Well,
There.
There we
okay,
go. Okay, go
buyer
ahead.
representation, broker compensation agreement. Now, remember, this is the one that now we can negotiate our commissions through the, without that additional contract. We have, obviously the time period, remember, it's got to be not more than 3 months. And when they say 3 months, it's actually 90 days. So count out your 90 days. If you have 91 days, your contract's void. So not to exceed that. And you can get one extension for an additional 90 days. If you're in escrow and your 90 days is going to run out, I would highly suggest that you get that extension signed or modification signed. Also remember, if you do not have a buyer broker agreement, you do not get paid. They cannot pay you. So that's real important. Second thing that's really important is that you have a buyer broker agreement before you show property. According to our MLS, if you found that property in the MLS, Article 9.1 says that if you show the property without a buyer broker agreement, you can be fined $2,500. And it's a fine that you get without being noted. You don't get a notice warning you. There's no warning. It's a $2,500 fine. And you say, well, how would they know I showed the property? Well, you open the lockbox. It has a time stamp. Presented the offer. That offer has a time stamp. So you want to make sure that when you're taking these buyers out, that prior to showing, prior to touring, that you have a signed contract with that buyer. Remember, just remember, Article 9.1, $2,500. Do you have an extra 2,500, Terry?
I do, but I don't want to use it for that.
I have a
Good.
question on that.
Yes,
Give a minute. Are we as listing agents required to see that they have a buyer broker agreement?
no, we're not the police.
Okay,
No, but if we don't like that agent, we could tattle on them. No, we are not the police. We don't, it's not up to us to monitor what other agents are doing other than if they're unethical about doing it. And if they don't present you with at least that 5th page of the contract along with their offer, because we do have to know how much they've agreed to, the buyer has agreed to pay their agent. Okay.
So Jackie,
Okay. Yes.
Jackie, I read something that it says all buyers agent in California will be required to sign a buyer broker representation agreement with their buyer clients as soon as practical, but no later than the executor of the buyer's offer to purchase the real property. So in this
That's
case,
correct.
it's a contradiction.
That's correct. But remember, we are a member of the National Association of Realtors. That settlement was with us as realtors. Real estate agents are going to be required now to have a buyer broker agreement, and they have to have it signed at their earliest convenience. Ours is prior to showing the property. Our agreement through the NAR settlement is prior to showing. So as realtors, no, we still play by the same rules, but at least real estate agents are on the same plane. They still have to get a buyer broker agreement at the latest, prior to writing that offer. So as soon as possible, but our agreement is prior.
So the MLS is required to have it prior.
Prior. 'Cause
Okay.
remember that 9.1, if you don't have that agreement prior to showing that property, you can be fined $2,500 if you're a member of CRMLS. You may be with a different, but you still have that agreement with the National Association of Realtors, the settlement.
I have a question, Jackie.
Yes.
Let's say it's expired, so we need to sign another one, or like extension,
If
like
it expires, you have to modify it or you have to get a new one. Yes.
So there is any modify like listing when
There's
it's
a modification.
There is a
form.
form that's called
is a form.
MTBR, which is modification to the buyer representation agreement, and that can extend it for an additional 90 days.
Correct.
And what? Can you
It
say
can
it again?
extend it for an additional 90 days.
MT, what did the form called?
MTBR,
MTB.
modification of terms for buyer representation.
Thank you.
Hi, Terry and Jackie. This is Sandy. I have a quick question. What if the buyer pay for the commission, the seller did not have to pay? Which box do I need to mark for the buyer representation?
On you're not asking for it on the purchase contract, and you have the agreement with your buyer. They're already signed that agreement, your buyer broker agreement. They've already agreed, yes, E1.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, whatever that amount is. And remember, you can also split that commission. Let's say seller is only willing to pay X, and your buyer will pay an additional 2X. So you get the total of 3X. Doesn't matter how it's paid. It just has to be, everybody has to sign and agree to it.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a clarifying question.
Yes.
If we are in escrow and the buyer agreement contract expires before the close of escrow, do we need to have an extension?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Good question. Absolutely. It's just like your listing agreement. Remember, when your listing agreement expires, if that contract doesn't go through, somebody else can come in and talk to your seller and relist it. You want to make sure you're protected when you're negotiating or when you're in escrow.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you.
And it's that same form what we talked about a minute ago, that modification of terms for the buyer
Right.
representation. Yeah.
Okay.
So I would probably just suggest then, if you know you're coming up on the expiration on your buyer broker, when you're submitting the offer, then have them also sign the modification of terms to
Exactly,
extend it.
when they really, really like you. So,
Perfect.
if something
Yeah.
goes bad, you've got it extended. Good
That's what I'm thinking.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Alrighty.
perfect, Jaime. You know what we think sometimes, and we all do this, is that we think that we have this great great rapport with these people and that nothing's ever gonna come back to bite us. And those are the people that occasionally come back to bite you, you know, when we think that it's okay. And so
Yeah.
it's just simpler to, like you said, Jaime, just make sure that you get those things signed and extended when you need to.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Terry, was there anything else on?
Miguel has his hand up again. Let's see if we can get him
Miguel,
this
are
time.
you gonna talk to us or just waving at us still? Apparently he doesn't know how to put his hand down. He must have been one of those kids in school. I had all the answers.
Yeah, I'm not positive, but it's been up there.
For quite a while.
Now Josie has her hand up. Let's see if
Yes,
she wants.
Josie.
Going back to the listing agreement, I heard you say that we have to input the listing within 24 hours of signature. That's new. And, you know, how do we get our photographers out there to get that done in that short a period of time? I mean, really? 24 hours now?
As far as getting a
It's been that
photographer
for
out
some
there,
time.
I thought
Yeah.
it was 3 days.
You can take one photo as long as you have one photo in there, or you can put it, you can get that signed exclusion from your seller to hold it off marketing for that time period. You need to get your photographer out there, put it in a coming soon. And then that way you're not accumulating days and you've got it under contract, so you don't have to worry about that. And you get your photographer out there or staging, whatever else you need, and then put it, you know, the date that it's gonna go live.
All right. Thank you.
Terry?
Yeah.
Is there anything else on the buyer broker agreement that we need to address?
If
no,
we
I
do-
don't think anything that's changed. Jaime, do you have something or?
Yeah, if we do put it in the MLS as coming soon, is there the, I can't remember, is there the requirement to put the picture if it's incoming soon?
You know, I don't remember, but I would say yes, one photo, because it says,
I believe
But-
one photo of the front
Front.
of the house.
yeah, so, yeah, because I'm sure, I've never read anything different. It's always been, at least one photo needs to be with it. So. I would be safe and just take your one photo with your camera, you know, with your phone. Just to be safe.
I believe it requires you to put one photo, but Miguel put in the comments, if my seller chooses to offer a concession, do I document it anywhere on the RLA or on an addendum?
No. That's why they took it out of the residential listing agreement. But you know what you could do is when you give your seller a net sheet on what their estimated costs are going to be, I would suggest putting on that and have them sign and date that they acknowledge that, because it's nothing more than they may. So, but at least you've made them acknowledge that you've had that discussion. What do you think, Terry?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's the right answer. We put out an addendum a little while ago. It was probably, well, I think it was about the same time that this whole thing changed in August and things, is that I wrote up an addendum. And I thought that I'd upload it in here. I didn't, but I can post it somewhere and somebody can get a hold of it. But basically it's just we take our regular CAR addendum and, you know, it has all of those blank lines. And in those blank lines, it said something like, after considering all aspects of the sale, seller agrees to pay up to such and such an amount. And so it was an addendum to, remember on that, on the other form, well, on the listing agreement now where it says, where's the listing agreement that says that? Anyway,
On the concessions.
yeah, we have that one little spot. I just have to make everybody motion sick here by scrolling around trying to find this. Just close your eyes if you get motion sickness.
I like that.
All right, well, anyway, it'll take us a while to find it, but then remember, it used to be on the MLSA about the seller authorizing us to market that they are willing to pay some concessions. And we had an addendum to that
Oh,
that had an amount.
yeah, see, I don't think that's a good idea.
Well, that's what I was saying earlier when we covered that part, is that I
Yeah.
wouldn't. put
Terry,
in-
can you repeat that, please?
Probably not.
It's being recorded, just
I
remember.
think I was kind of stumbling through it, so I don't know that I actually could. But if, you know what, if you send me an email or something or a text, and I'll take a copy of it and shoot it to you.
E2 was seller willing to consider offers with concession.
Who?
Eat,
E2.
8B2.
E as in Edward.
what number?
Yeah, there's E's under a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah, but
It was
what,
on
yeah,
the
what's the
listing-
number?
On the
What was-
listing agreement, sorry, E2, it was after C3. It was toward the beginning of your presentation.
Page
See,
one.
no wonder we forgot. We have short-term memory.
Right at the top,
Page one.
the listing, residential listing.
Okay, there it is.
Right here.
Good
Yeah.
job. All right, so notice what it says here, which is why we put together that little addendum. It says that no amount of possible concession will be stated in such marketing unless seller notifies broker in writing of the amount. And so what we did was we put together an addendum to go along with this, that basically gave an amount that they would be willing to pay this amount. And we also said when we were covering this, that probably getting an amount in writing is not a great idea. But using this statement that they use here, which is seller is willing to consider offers asking for concessions, is probably a safer way to go, and it also is a more negotiable way to go. And it's actually what NAR was kind of forced into doing anyhow by the settlement and interference from the Department of Justice and everything else. So I think you're safer not having an amount. But if they want to discuss an amount, if you want to discuss an amount, Jackie brought up an idea about the, or which is a good thought, about putting it in the net sheet when you give it to them, although the net sheet is not, you know, that's.
It's not enforceable at all.
It's not enforceable. It's
but
just
they're-
like it said in the MLS, that the MLS stuff isn't enforceable. It's all just
Yeah,
conversation.
but at least when you talk to an agent, if they say, are they willing to pay a concession? Yes. You don't have to tell them how much.
Yeah.
Bring your offer. Bring your,
Let's see what you got.
yeah.
Trying to think if there's anything in here that we needed to cover that like is,
I have a question. Is the form BIPP still in effect or was that eliminated?
BIPP is still there.
Okay.
That's the
and-
buyer identification of properties.
Okay. Yes,
The
Okay.
SPBB is one of the ones that was eliminated.
okay. Thank you.
And you know, I just included this in here just so that you would know what, basically what the CARs and NARs position on these different questions here. Written buyer agreements 101. See, that's good. I have a lot of 101s. So anyway, this just talks about the different things that you can that go into today's contracts. But Jackie brought this up when she was talking about the BRBC. And it says the buyer must enter into an agreement to acquire the type of property described in the BRBC during the BRBC specified representation period or any extension thereof. And so, yes, you have to have a representation agreement. Now, there is one other representation agreement that is okay. It's just that it's limited, and that's the PSRA, the Property Showing Representation Agreement, which is a modified BRBC. But we've checked with legal and that still counts, and they still have the things in there like broker involvement. And you know that broker involvement, and we've covered that before in some of our classes on the BRBC and things, but broker involvement is actually broker involvement. It's kind of a sad thing where the broker actually has to be involved to get paid. But but it means that you have shown them, physically shown them the property, or you have virtually shown them the property. Yes, virtual showing is okay. If they live in Georgia and they're looking to move to Corona or whatever, you can virtually show them things. That's considered broker involvement. Certainly, if you've written an offer, that's considered broker involvement. If you've done advanced work for them regarding market analysis, regarding a specific property, that's broker involvement. Sending them a list of properties that are in their price range is not considered broker involvement.
And you do not need a buyer broker agreement in order to send out that information also.
That's correct. So anyway, there's broker involvement, there's requirements that you have to do as well as what they have to do. And the compensation amount, you're discussing that in paragraph 2E of the BRBC, right? We already covered that. And so that's in there, that whatever it happens to be, X.5% or something. Let me just kind of reestablish something there. I know it's 11 o'clock. We promised you all we'd be out of here in an hour, and we will, because we started 4 minutes late due to technical issues. But anyway, that is that you guys are valuable in a transaction. You are like the center of the transaction, whether it's a listing or whether it's a sale. You guys are right in the middle of it. You do a lot of work. I probably don't have to tell you that. How many hours? Don't ever figure out your hourly wage. Because in a lot of cases, your hourly wage is going to be minimum wage, and you don't want to get to that point. You are a professional. You had to do some testing. You had to do some studies. You did some schooling. You went through mentoring processes or whatever. You've gone through a lot to get to where you are. So don't devalue yourself when you get to here. I've had a couple of classes where I've said, but when we've been talking and somebody says, well, how much should I put in there? And I've reversed the question. I says, well, what do you think? And when I reverse the question, it's funny that they come out with anything from 1% to, I actually had a 4%. And percentages aren't important. It's what are you going to do for them? How much are you going to put into it? How much have you already put into it? And don't devalue yourself. It's not, it doesn't make sense. You're a professional. And any other profession, you know, you talk to an attorney, you talk to a doctor, you talk to anybody else. They don't say, well, you know what, for Jackie, I took care of her for, you know, a measly $12,000. But for you, I'll do it for $6,000 because I like you or something. Don't devalue yourself. Pay attention to those numbers that you put in there. Pay attention to the negotiation process. Yes, it's a negotiation. Yes, it's decided between you and whoever you're represented, whichever side, but you're worth something. So make sure that you take that into consideration when you're going out there. You don't have to overprice yourself. You don't have to underprice yourself. And I don't know what those numbers are. You do. You know how much time is going to be spent. So don't be afraid to talk to them about pricing. Here's the broker involvement that we were just talking about. And this is all included in your packet, by the way. And my buyer's refusing to sign. Is there a simpler version? Yes, I alluded to that a minute ago. Property showing representation agreement. It's limited. It's, 3 properties, I think, in 30 days. So it doesn't give you as much room to work, but it still is valid. And other than that, I think we're good. One thing they changed on the open house advisory is can be used, and this is printed on there now, can be used for open house or individual private showings. Now, obviously, the individual private showing is if somebody was at an open house, if somebody wanted to go back and see an open house, this is not to take the place of the others. This is to kind of go hand in hand with open house things. It's not to replace either of those other two. So don't confuse that up there. All right. Now we're exactly 1 hour.
We are all out of here.
So my contract and Jackie's contract says that we only have 1 hour.
I think that this showing here is only good for 1 hour, so we may be cut off any moment now. So I just want to say thank you to those of you that felt it was important to take time out of your day to come and learn what you should be doing properly. It's very important to our industry that we have people like you out there concerned and learning all the time. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for you too, Jackie and Terry. Thank you.
Of course, we're glad to be.
Thank you.
Glad to be involved. And by the way, you still have our phone numbers, so you can still call if you need.
Still call us.
We answer during the holidays.
Yep, we sure
Thank
do.
you. Happy New Year.
Happy New
Thank
Year.
you, everybody. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Everybody.
Miguel's hand is still up. I feel bad. Well, there he is over there with his earphones on, though. I know he's listening. All right. So I'm going to end this, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you,
Fun rest of
Jackie.
the
Thank you,
week.
Terry. Thank you, everyone. Okay,
Of course.
bye-bye.